super special when you become friends. Like
Heck
it's
yeah.
amazing. So
You are my
let
friend,
me
Daniel. I'm so glad
thank
to hang out with you every time that we have grid and
I know.
talk
We
with
just need more time. The distance, it's just too
True.
far apart. But
It is.
so let me ask you. We were presented the opportunity to do this, obviously, and internally, what's your initial thoughts when this was presented to you?
My initial thoughts, were this is really exciting, and I'm excited to be here. And this is Crush the Commissioner was, like, a really cool name, especially because I feel like I've gone in to that mindset with too many conversations with Mather. Because Mather's someone that if you wanna talk to him about something or if you, like, are wondering something, like, you can absolutely just, like, text him or call him and he'll, like, walk you through it. And this is my 5th season with the United Grid League, formerly the Florida Grid League, and when I first came on to the commentary side, the production side, I remember having a conversation with him, and I was asking him all these questions, and at the time, I don't know if they were even appropriate questions to ask as far as, like, "Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?" And, like, didn't know exactly how to frame my questions, so to speak. But through all the conversations that we've had, it's really just, like, opened my eyes to, like, his world and his understanding of the sport, and taught me how to ask better questions as well, and how to get to the root of what I really wanna know. So, Math is just someone that I really love to ask questions to. So that's mostly why I'm excited, I think.
Well, and that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna ask him a ton of questions. Obviously, we got some folks in the chat. Arturo, what's up? Lauren, what's up? How are y'all? Hope all is well. But we got to get to it. Let's bring them in. Let's light the fire. Let's get it going.
Let's do it.
Mather Wiswall, the commissioner of the United Grid League. Mather, what's up?
What's going on, guys?
So I gotta know, obviously, what sparks something like this to happen.
I don't do a good job of putting information out there about how or why we do things. There's a lot of things that we have responsibilities that we have, but especially in the last couple of years, it's really become more and more apparent that we need to do a better job of that. I need to do a better job of that. So, I hope that this is one of many similar conversations that we have just about why things are the way they are, but also the theory of grid league. Like, it is such a complex and in-depth topic that we could spend a lot of time on, and I hope we do sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously we got a bunch of questions. We got people in the chat, but just to kind of lay some groundwork before we get into the meat and heart of all the questions, I got to know, the Grid League has been an ever evolving, league, and it's something that you've put a lot of time, a lot of attention into with, resources that, are limited, and you maximize the best that you can do and put the best product out for consumption. But when you look at now the playoffs of 2025 are upon you, when you look back at all that growth and all that things, what are some things that people may not know, or maybe some new knowledge that they can have, or some misconceptions that help them understand, where the league is and why decisions are made, and why things are the way they are sometimes?
Well, I have an answer for that, but we got to first get something out of the way that I really just have to mention. What's going on with Micah Parsons?
It's when you're as big as the Dallas Cowboys, you've got to stay in the limelight. And this is just another thing to keep the Cowboys at the top of the ESPN news feed, baby.
All right, so little context here. I have a very special relationship with Daniel. He's actually my best friend that is also a Cowboys fan. And he's
I'm
my
a
only
recovered
fan.
Cowboys fan, by the way.
So this is a special bond or non-bond that we share. And
Yeah.
I think it's actually really cool because like the boys chat I have right now at home from Philadelphia, literally lighting it up about Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones. And it's literally the main topic of discussion. It's not even about the Eagles. It's about the freaking Cowboys and all the things that they're doing. And there's such a deep connection amongst me and my friends related to this topic. And, you know, this is something that you and I share, that all real true sports fans share, that is like the core behind everything that we do at the Grid League. And, you know, just something that put things in context, because like, you know, you're going through a hard time with the Cowboys right now. It's a rough time to be a Cowboys fan.
How every season starts, man.
Yeah. Hey, look, the Eagles are flying high, and we're
I
loving
would
it.
too. If my hand was as heavy as there was, I would be flying high too.
Absolutely. And but like I've been through the hard times. I've been through, like, the 90s were brutal as an Eagles fan and whatever. So I know like what he's going through, but you also have to enjoy it while you're on top, and you have to grind it in there, and you have to, but like, you know, the context behind it is that, you know, I was one of those Eagles fans that would like get up, turn on Sports Center. It would be on repeat for 4 times until I went to work. I would have sports radio on my way to work. I would do my meetings. Between meetings, I was listening to sports radio. Afterwards, first thing we would do, you know, watch a Phillies game, talk about how we're going to the next game. Like, I couldn't buy food, but I would save money to go to an Eagles game, you know? And that feeling and that connection that I have with my friends from that, and just like how that helped me through that period of my life, is like one of the big drivers behind all of the reasons that Grid League exists, but also the way that it's structured. Is like, why did I feel like that? How did I feel like that? What was the value of that for me and my friends and the people around me? And how can we create a sport that creates that out of nothing? Because football has history. My dad was an Eagles fan. Everybody that I went to school with, their families brought them up as Eagles fans. And that's powerful and that's interesting. So you can't just, you know, make that come out of thin air. But yeah, that's like, I don't know, like I just started throwing that up because I had to bring the Micah Parsons thing up. Literally, my chat's been going on for like a few days.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I had to get it out of the way. But like, I think that's something that's important for also people to understand, is like there's so many dimensions to this sport that are primed to generate that type of feeling in people. And some of them, and I'm sure we'll get into this, make it a lot harder to start a sport, and they make it a lot harder to get over the hump of becoming a fan. But when we do, and when we are, it brings us in that much harder. And I think some of us are starting to see and feel that have been connected to the league long enough to start to feel that. But yeah, that's like the basis of why we do this. And that's like the feeling that we're going after in generating in others. So it's not really the why. But, you know, we also are very aware of like what the core components and things to do to maximize the experience for every different dimension in the league in a lot of ways. Like, obviously we're not all knowing, but like, and I think this is kind of the core of what you were getting at, Daniel, which is, you know, we are a very small team. We have very limited resources. The amount of people that pay attention, that see our sport, compared to the size of the team operating it, is way out of balance, way out of whack. And so that does like lend itself to limitations that often become friction points for people within the league. And I'm the first one to feel those. Ruby, my sister, business partner, first one to feel those. Brandon, Lindsay, Steph, first ones to feel those. But then it does go out. It goes to the players. It goes to the team owners, and everybody feels those friction points. And so yeah, that's kind of like we also want to uncover a lot of that today, if we can, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. You know, you talk about the resources, and I think if people really want to know exactly how, small and how tight and how, what I would say, how close gripped this team of people is, you need to go and watch setup. Watch how many people that actually do the setup of the grid and the equipment, and then look at it from a lens the next day when everything is complete and go, holy shit, like that wasn't a lot of people and they did all of that. And I think the few times that I've been there to help set up and do it from start to finish, that's one of the biggest, misconceptions that I had was it's not this big thing, but it's people who care enough and are passionate enough and they get the job done. So it's about having quality people over quantity. And I think quantity will come, and that's one of the questions that we'll get to today at some point is like where we're going. What's the growth in your mind? Like what's that look like? But yeah, I was blown away by what was done with the small amount of people, and they just get after it, man. So like tip your hat to those people and tip your hat to you and Ruby and Steph and Lindsay and Brandon for being a part of that and building it and putting it together, because you just don't wish it to happen. Like you have to go out and make those things happen. So let's get into some of these questions. Obviously the first thing that, no structure, we're just going to throw questions out there and wherever the conversation takes us. And I'll tell this to people in the chat. If you feel passionate about something, put it in the chat. Cassie's got it down. She's got it on lock. She'll be commenting and she'll be bringing it up. So if you feel like it's something that's going to contribute to what we're talking about, or if you feel like it's a tangent that we need to speak on, let's bring it up. Let's bring it to light. And we'll talk about it. But the first thing that's been one of the big things that I'm hearing a lot is sub rules. Can we change them? They're confusing. They affect the full fan experience, and you're not seeing the best players all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So speak a little bit on sub rules, and is there any way that we're changing it, or any thoughts to change it, or why they are the way they are?
Yeah, absolutely. So for people that don't know, the original visionary behind the sport was Tony Budding. And he laid out this plan for the sport and why each thing is the way it is. And we've actually changed a lot of the plan. There's always things that you're going to try and test and they work and don't work. And I get into some of the data around why we made some of the decisions we did to change things. But this is one of the core concepts that he stated. And I imagine that we're going to talk a lot about some of his core concepts and his visions around the sport today. Because this is one of them. And the inspiration behind the roster rules now is soccer. And, I think, I used to, one of my roommates growing up or in college and whatnot was Colombian. So I've seen a lot of soccer games. Like he was huge into soccer. I still have no idea what the sub rules are for soccer. And I think like there are a lot of people that watch Grid now that feel the same way. Like they don't really know the full details of what the sub rules are. And I get that. However, if you don't have some sort of substitution rule, the amount of strategy required to execute your team's best strengths drops dramatically. And, I've done a lot of thinking about this. I've talked to Tony about this. I've talked to other people in the sport about this. And we kind of see it as an investment, because anybody that says like people don't get it and they might make it a little bit harder for a head coach to choose what the roster is, or they might limit certain players in certain situations. That's all absolutely true. And for right now, the benefit is not as high as what is perceived to overcome that investment, that challenge. But here's how I see it. It's kind of like when you put money into the stock market and you don't see a return right away, but you're investing in the long term. And that's what the roster rules really are. Because, again, I led this thing talking about football and why I personally had such an emotional and powerful connection to football, and still do. And a huge portion of that is the debate, the analysis, the disdain, the being upset, being excited about game plans, about formations, about the structure of a football team roster according to, the head coach's vision on how it should be done. Those details are what suck you in and make you a powerful fan. Playing Madden all day with all the different, formations and everything like that. And, if we just had races where you just send the best player out that's obvious for that situation, you lose a lot of that opportunity and that possibility. And I think we're probably a few years away from that actually taking root. But when it's there, and this is one of those things that we talked about, like when we get over the hill of people starting to fall down the hill of becoming a fan, people they have more opportunity to be more and more vested into having an opinion about what a coach does, or seeing how a player can benefit a team because of how the roster rules are, and having an opinion on a decision that was made or that broke down. And I think that's a really, and this is Tony said this, and I've thought about it for the 10 years of Pitt since, and I think he's absolutely right. You need that to have a really powerful sport, because one of the great new sports in this era, sport I put in quotes, but because there's not a lot that came from nothing and had big impact in society, and that's American Ninja Warrior. And we've taken a lot of inspiration from how those races are run and how they organize and situate things, because they did what we're trying to do. They started from nothing and they came and became a major part of society. But now it's starting to tail off. There's only so many things you can do with a certain set of challenges. There's a limited amount of strategy involved. There's also other aspects of what we have that they don't, that I think will allow us to be in it for the long run and to develop that generational connection and fandom over, multiple generations that I talked about with football. And a lot of that has to do with getting deeply ingrained with what the strategy is, really understanding on a deep level. And now I recognize that we're talking about a percentage of football fans that know things on that level. And that's true of any sport. But there's a statistic out there, and I actually tried to find it before I came up, but I've heard this multiple times over the years. Something like 80% of the revenue and the value driven by a team sport is from that small percentage of raving fans. You need to have that percentage of raving fans to have a real sport. So, that's, and we've had team owners that don't like doing this. And I understand why there's not, and they're like, well, what if we just take them away and then re-implement them, or something like that. And I just think that, we are building that foundation now. We are building the awareness that we need to disseminate across a fandom like that. It is happening. It's happening at a slow pace because there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to understand. And that's one of the big challenges we have as a sport. But I believe it's one of the things that will help propel us into what this sport can actually be.
I mean, you do have people like, you got Dakota Shackleton. He's talking about the sub rules is a part of strategy that he doesn't mind. Like, he appreciates the strategy. You got Artur, piggybacking off that, saying the same thing. It should be challenging to put together a roster because of these sub rules.
Absolutely.
It'd be interesting to see what some of the coaches would say. I would venture to say that they would somewhat agree. Like, there is a challenge with putting a roster together, but that's kind of what makes your team great, is that you can put that strategy into building a roster. You know, Josh Newell talks about to see 2 wild cards from this year that worked, expanded to everyone as a wild card with 5 races per match. I mean, I don't know how realistic that is or if that's even feasible, but I mean,
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the team owners that brought up the point that we don't get key players in their key places, and that like takes away from the fan experience. It was a great point, and we added a wild card because of it. And you know, I'm a little nervous that might be too much, to be honest, but it seemed to go well. And you know, to speak to what Artur said, some of my fondest memories of this sport are when I was a general manager of a team and I would sit down with my head coach and our captains and we would work on the strategy together. And like it would be the day before a match, we'd go down, we get breakfast, and I fucking loved it. It was so fun. Like I would be up all night, like looking at the roster, studying it, thinking it, like configuring it. I would have all these ideas to present and I was just so excited and fun to do that. And it felt like football. It really did. And so, you know, I'm super passionate about, it's an important component of the sport. And I think that's what really brings people deep, and people like Joshua who are like, getting it. Like they're falling in love with it. Like I am. And a lot of other people are because it has that depth that sucks you in.
yeah, I mean, you got someone like, so here's a prime example. Sam Crivet, New York Wolves, new to the sport, and even him, like, to learn it. I think that's the difficulty. And I think part of that question was the fan experience with these sub rules is if you're new to the sport and you're not understanding it, how do we understand it?
Love that question. Love that point. So I'm going to bring it back to football. Football is an insanely complex game. And there are so many variables that you have to take into consideration. But the objective, get the football into the end zone. That's it. That's all you have to do. In grid, in most of the races except for the ladder, all you have to do, cross the finish line. Simple AF. And that's the whole goal. Is like you sit down. Oh, what's this team got to do? Oh, they got to get across the finish line first. Right. Do you now know enough to watch the race and be excited when it's really close and you can tell they're rep for rep? Do you now know enough? Yes, you do. Just like in football, oh, they're getting close to the finish line, or they just threw a deep pass. Oh, that's exciting. Yes, you know enough to be affected. And that is good enough for, a group of friends to go to a match and have a great time because they know their team wins when they get across the finish line first.
I think that's what's good, because like if you watch, with the exception of the ladder, like if you were just to tune in and watch any race, regardless of what the standards and parameters are for that race or those elements, how it progresses just because of the way the sport and the grid is configured, because you can watch and go, oh shit, like one team is ahead of another, like as simple as you could put it. So I think the sub rules are similar. Like at some point it's going to put strategy, but at the end of the day, it's simple. Like finish first. Whoever's out there, finish first.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I was watching the CrossFit Games and I'm not super big into CrossFit. I just started doing it 2 weeks ago. In case you didn't hear, it's my whole personality now, actually, is how I should rephrase that. But I watch the games every year for like maybe the last 4 or 5. And like this year, I was like paying extra close attention because I've actually been following athletes like throughout the season, just from like a sports perspective, just like be able to watch it, like compared to what we do here in grid. And I was like, man, I love grid so much because like I don't even have to listen or like look at the score at the top and I know who's winning more or less because you're moving down a grid. So what you said about the sub rules not, doing much to like, okay, like offense and defense, yeah, whatever. Like there's certain players that do certain things that you can know about, and it adds some kind of excitement for a lot of people. But if you just want to go with your buddies and like watch grid and you're moving down the grid, like you really don't give a crap about sub rules or like have to know about them. And it doesn't really affect the spectator experience of that. So I thought that was a really cool way to say that.
Yeah, and I think, we've tested so many different things with how do we grow the sport the fastest. And when it comes to, proving that the sport is watchable, that was like the next main objective when we started live streaming in 2021. And we have matches that have hundreds of thousands of views, and 99.9% of them have no idea how grid works. They don't know anybody that's playing. They have no connection to any of the teams. They saw a thumbnail. They're like, what is this? They clicked on it and they watched the freaking match. You know what I mean? It's watchable. You don't have to know all those things to get sucked in and watch. Now, that doesn't make you a big time fan. It doesn't make you somebody that anticipates a Grid League match and says, I'm going to watch that with my friends and family when they come on. But that's step number one, is saying, all right, when somebody lands on this, do they watch it? And like you look at what other sports are out there that do the same thing, there's not very many. Like you watch the CrossFit Games because you do CrossFit. You watch baseball because you grew up watching baseball and playing baseball. But there are not many sports out there, and there are a few. Tech ball is one. There's not ultimate tag. There's a tag one that's another one. But there's very few that have that viral component to them where people will land on it and watch, and that is step one to prove. And I feel like we've done a good job doing it.
Well, let's transition a little bit. Let's talk about home team. What is the purpose of having a home and away team outside of like? Is there any advantage of being a home team? Like in baseball, I'm a baseball guy. So when you tell me the home team, like I know what the significant advantage is of being the home team. But I also know like you do get first choice and ringer, but like what is really the point of having home and away if there's really no distinct advantage? Or
there's really not. There's not, unfortunately. Like it's one of those things that sports has, and it will matter someday. But right now it doesn't, because I can't wait until we get back to when we do actually have home and away matches and we go to somebody's, local college basketball stadium and play a Grid League match. And when that happens, home and away is going to matter just as much as it does in every other sport. But right now it's kind of a designation that doesn't mean a whole lot, to be honest.
Is it more so like you look at a long-term approach and having a home and away team is appropriate because most other sports have a home and away team per se, and so it just makes sense to have that?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, it's it's a way to tie who chooses the ringer first to something. But that's really the extent of it, to be open.
Lauren says, come to Kansas City. Lauren, just hold tight.
Kansas City Beefs.
We're gonna talk growth and expansion and trajectory of the league. Just you wait. Pros and cons. Obviously, this was a question that came up. You could probably pick of the 4 teams because it came from one of the 4 teams that are playing in a doubleheader in a couple weeks. But pros and cons of doubleheaders. Do you see it being a problem? Like people are tired, it gets messy, it kind of gets, referees start having some issues. Is potential injury? When we do double headers, are we getting truly the best representation of the 2 teams? But also like a follow-up to that is, does playoffs and a champion being crowned on a double header scenario, does that really crown the best team? I know what I would say, but I'm going to let you field that.
Yeah, I mean, under the conditions that we lay out for everybody, yes. everybody has to play under the same conditions. So, we've done things similarly for several years. So when you build your grid league team, that should be part of your consideration. I suppose is one answer. That said, do I wish we could do away with doubleheaders? Probably. They are hard on the staff for sure. And they do tax the referee squad for sure. And you do see that show up. So, when we did doubleheaders traditionally, we took out either the triads or the echoes. And that saved a lot. Like that, those are the two longest sets of races in any match. And so it cuts down on the length of the match significantly. It cuts down on the fatigue of the players. And it helps everything that I just mentioned and that the concerns were related to having doubleheaders. Well, teams didn't want to do that. They wanted to play full matches, which I totally get, but it doesn't come without a cost. So that is one potential solution, is to reduce the length of the matches, because here are the benefits of a doubleheader. Is it consolidates resources by a lot, not just for the league, but for players and teams as well, because they can travel one time and play two matches. And there's a lot of value in that monetarily, logistically, time-wise. So there is a ton of benefits across the board for doubleheaders. I can't wait till we get to the point where we have a basketball stadium, you go in, and a home team and away team plays, and then everybody goes home. And that's the whole event. Because that's how it was in the NPGL in the first year, and that's how every other sports league is. Right now, that's not possible. That's not feasible given our situation. And there are a lot of benefits to doing matches together, but that's where we're headed. I don't know how long it's going to take, and I don't even it's not like a predetermined thing. Like, we can always make adjustments, and there are lots of possible ways that this could play out. I'm happy to get into some of them, but that kind of, every decision you make for how you run the matches has benefits, but it also has costs.
Right.
And so that's like the balance there.
I have a quick question on that. I do remember that we used to cut down either the triad or the echoes of during the double headers. What was it specifically that made teams not want to do that this season?
The main thing that I hear is, there's two. The main one is the points. So teams want as many opportunities to get points in the season because they do make a big impact on whether or not a team makes playoffs and the seeding process and whatnot. So that's the big one I hear from teams. And this is the one that I really appreciate, and that I am glad that teams and players feel this too, but it's the connection with what is a real grid league match. What is you build your team for a real grid league match. And so it should look like a real grid league match. When you're missing the echoes and you're missing triads, it doesn't feel the same. And you don't, leverage your roster the same way. It cuts that out significantly. So the connection with, respecting the intention of what a full grid league match is the other reason, which I really resonate with. But the points thing is the other.
Yeah, I remember them seeing them not hurt as much after a match, and I'm like, it's not as fun. I want to see you work for it.
Tom brings up a good point here. Double headers, having them every weekend decreases the financial burden of athletes having to travel and pay their expenses, and it increases exposure. What is the thought to go, okay, we want more matches, the players want more matches, but you're saying that it financially is and logistically, when you can have multiple matches on a day, there is benefit to that. Is there a thought to go, all right, our entire season's going to double. We're just going to do double headers every single match week?
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right in the points that he made. And those are the benefits to double headers. They do come with costs. And one of them is the tax on the team and what that ends up, or the tax on the referees and the equipment crew, and what that plays out as on the grid. because people aren't happy when those things happen, obviously. So there's a give and take there. But he's absolutely right about those benefits. And there is potential of that. Now, the other thing is being invited to an expo has a lot of benefits to the league and the sport. One, our overhead costs go way down. Our amount of effort in ticket sales goes way down, which are two really valuable things to be able to focus on the most important things related to making a match amazing. That said, the number of expos that are 2 days is less and less because, the amount of sports that are 2 days are less and less. And even the one that we went to in Texas, one of their main sports wasn't there on the second day. So, I do think that 2-day weekends, and you see this in CrossFit too, where there are not very many multi-day CrossFit competitions anymore because it's too much to ask somebody to do from a spectator perspective and from a vendor perspective are the two main things. So I'm all for doing it, especially when, for example, we have remote teams where we could get a couple of remote teams and cut down on their travel and get some of their fan bases involved. That's a prime opportunity to do a double header. And that's part of the inspiration behind Texas, because then we're spreading out our impact and we're giving opportunity to players and teams that have to travel more than everybody else otherwise.
Right. Lauren just gives you guys a shout out. She imagines how hard it is for the staff and how hard it is to set up for a match and all that. So she just wanted to say thank you. I know it can be a thankless job, Mather. So anytime you get a thank you, I want to make sure you see it. So
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. I will say, I'm the kind of person that I don't mind going head on at a challenge. And, 2 days, yes, they are taxing. They're brutal, but it's more about the staff. It's more about how do we make it manageable for them, but also put the best product on the grid. And, when you're a referee, it's hard to communicate how on point and present you have to be even close to making the right call for hours on end, and nobody has to experience that. I had referees at the end of Dallas that were I can't think, I can't talk, I'm trying to form words, but they're falling out of my mouth. And I've been there. I know exactly what they're talking about, because when you're that intensely focused on something for that long, it's so mentally taxing. So that's really nobody wants to be in a situation where your referees are working against where they are physically, and there are solutions that potentially we could get to at some point where, we have possible alternate referee squads that we could sub in and things like that. But there's also challenges with building out the referee crew as well. So,
I hinted at it in the chat, and I know you spoke about this a couple weeks ago in regards to ladders and weights and things to that nature, but you got Dalton, who, he's saying the ladders are too light. People, make people have to do squats on cleans and snatches to make them heavier. In his defense, he's saying he's the type of athlete that should never even consider having to do or being able to do the last, quadrant of a ladder. So kind of going back to what you mentioned a couple weeks ago in regards to ladders, now that it's sit in a couple weeks, you still have people wanting heavier portions of these ladders. Is there any thought to making it heavier or changing it at all?
Yeah. So if you didn't watch that video I made, I talked at length about the theory behind ladders and why they are the way they are. And in that video, I said that we are going to increase ladders over time. And in fact, we did increase the ladder coming up in playoffs. In the Walking Dead match format, that's the deadlift clean ladder. We increased that. So yes, we are increasing ladders. What I said in that video is we never want to get to the point where people are blowing or are not under time pressure because they're only doing a couple lifts in the ladder. I think it's important to have multiple people finish the ladder at at the heavier versions, at least a couple people per team should finish. And I feel like, some of the ladders we have now are in that range. And one of them is the snatch hand snatch ladder. Some teams barely have anybody finish that. But our optimal score is, somewhere in the 60 range for the ladder, on average, I think, because it allows teams to have some people that will blow right through it, which is good for the visual of speed and fast action. And you still have enough where there's heavier lifts that are going to really challenge some people. And you can see the angst as they approach the bar, which is another important component of the ladder, because you need to have the opportunity for your coach to read the player and say, you should hit that or you shouldn't run off, because that's, a huge part of what the ladder is.
I mean, Dakota's dropping some bombs today. He said less than 10 athletes, male and female, in the whole league cleared all the ladders. So maybe it's not as easy as what people think it is, which there's a lot of truth to that. I want to move to referees. This is one of the topics that comes up, I'm sure, quite frequently. But in regards to referee flags, what is the purpose of a referee's flag? And, when we talk about challenges and reviews, when you look at the referee flags, the challenges, the review system, is there anything in the works to change it, modify it, make it different, or make it better?
Yes. Yeah.
What is that?
I'm excited for this one.
Yeah. I mean, the honest answer is it's TBD to an extent. This is the first time we've had an official challenge flag this year. So this was an experiment, and this came at the suggestion of a lot of team owners that heard it from their players, but agreed. And, we thought it was a great idea. And we kind of always knew that we would re-implement flags because they were in the MPGL. We would re-implement flags at some point. But, logistically, we didn't really have the means to carry through with it until now, because we have a much better, more thorough live stream than we've ever had before. And so we are going to present some options to modify the challenge flag moving forward. And it will change, but it's an experiment. Like it's like anything. We're going to see how it goes, and we're going to make adjustments just like the NFL does in rules every year. They propose new rules and they make adjustments based on the outcome, and we'll do the same.
If I can interject here, I think a lot of people that have problems with referee flags maybe don't necessarily have problems with the referee flags, but have problems with how long it takes. But it seems overwhelmingly coming from a perspective of people who haven't been here for very long and haven't seen like what's now a referee flag used to be, which is basically like, oh boy, like I don't know what to do about this. Like we're gonna sit here for like 30 minutes and look at the rule book, and we're gonna talk amongst ourselves, and like everybody's gonna be pissed off. And I think personally, it's evolved into this, which is a lot more productive than it used to be. And of course, I think it'll get better as we, make more adjustments and make clear rules so that we can like go back, and hopefully we get instant replay even, and we can like look at things faster like how the NFL does. But it is like overwhelmingly a lot better than it used to be. And I just had to say that because it's a huge difference and accomplishment.
Well, I appreciate that. And I do want to also point out that I agree. We want them to be shorter. Like we don't want them to be long. And the balance as a referee that you're trying to walk is making the absolute best call you can, because on the opposite side of that, if you make the wrong call, you got hell to pay with everybody involved. And that takes a ton of time and emotion and expense. And so there is a real cost to not taking the time you need with the limited screens and opportunities to see things that we have to figure out the right call. On the other side of that, everything we do is the player or the viewer experience, the spectator experience. Like it is not a good spectator experience to sit there and wait for 5 minutes for an answer. So we've got to get better. we will, and as resources become available, we will deploy them.
And I'll say this, just having the advantage of seeing what goes into referees looking at a review and looking at trying to make, for everybody in the chat, there's nobody out there that's like, I'm okay with making the wrong call. They're not. They are literally going from screen to screen, slowing it down, pausing it, taking a look at it. And there's a lot that goes into it. And so for the people that are like, this needs to be fast, this needs to be quick, like, great. Well, what's your solution to making it that way? Because it's not as easy and cut and dry as you think. Because I see it, and they do a great job trying to make sure they solidify the right call on the grid. And so I think, like you said, as the resources expand, there will be more technological things that we can do that speed this up. But right now, I think everyone's doing a pretty decent job at what they can possibly do in the amount of time given. Because what would you rather have, guys? Would you rather it be quick and wrong, or take a little bit of time and be right? So,
and get screwed over and not be able to, rectify it or have that justice done for you.
Yeah.
And, Tom has a great comment. You guys hit the nail on the head with ref challenges this year. Cut down on the time of matches overall versus coaching and politicking after each race for reruns like we had last year. Definitely.
Yeah, and part of what Cassie referenced was when really big decisions had to be made in the past, multiple years ago, we would take so friggin' long.
Yeah.
But the main reason was because we weren't on the same page as decision makers, and we were looking at things differently. And this is one of the things I'm most grateful for about Brandon, is we are on the same friggin' page. We are cut from the same cloth. It's very rare that we disagree. We do sometimes, sometimes significantly. But when we're on the grid, we're pretty in sync. And we know, like, when it's time for him to make the decision and run with it, and if he feels like he needs an alternate perspective, and that's really, 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 really cut down on the amount of decision-making time. And this speaks to another point, is the single best thing that we can do as a referee squad to improve is retain referees and have them come back year after year. Because the more time me and Brendan have together, the better we get. And the more time our core referees have together, the better we get. And it's important for everybody that has a hard time understanding what it's like to be a referee to know that, because ultimately, if a referee comes and it's their first year and they have a lot of promise and they make a huge mistake, and then they get, booed out of the stadium or whatever because players are upset, which is totally understandable, and I appreciate the passion, but they never come back, our referee squad gets worse. And, we do see that year over year where people just don't want to deal with it, so it's just important to point that out. Look, you have to have a thick skin when you're a referee, and you have to be able to, slough off the emotion that is inevitable with Grid League, because that's part of what makes it amazing. But it's also worth acknowledging that is the case.
I think something else, and Cassie, I think Josh was the one who said this in the chat, is, a fact that there's has to be an actual penalty for faults. Like in football, like if you get called for holding, you just don't get to start where you were. You got to go back 10 yards. So any thoughts to having a penalty portion to some of these faults?
I mean, there are for some of them. What I don't like about it, so an example of some of them that there are for is a distance element where you have to come back to the previous hash mark, or if you have to do a quadrant on broken and having to redo that. So that's like a form of that. What I don't like about that personally is it slows everything down, and we really try to avoid creating situations where a penalty or a fault slows the race down or takes the team out of it. We want somebody to be able to overcome a fault, because especially if the other team gets a fault, but we don't want to get a situation where they get a fault, like one fault, and it just takes them out of the race. But
I think Mather, I think he meant on the rerun, not necessarily during the actual.
I see. Sorry,
If it definitively affects the outcome of the race. Sorry.
I see. Okay. So you're saying like have unequal start times or more distance to cover, essentially?
I believe so. So kind of like instead of okay, race, the team that didn't have the fault goes ahead and then maybe like a delayed start time for the team that did have the fault that needed to be reran.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to think through that more. Because it's not necessarily, and in fact, a lot of times it's not a player's fault that
Yeah.
has to be rerun, and usually it's a referee's issue,
Like a miscount or
a
something.
miscount. Yeah, it's not the team's fault necessarily. So, where I do think a penalty comes into play are some of the, rules that we have to implement for the flow of the game or the match. That if continuously ignored, we have to have some sort of penalty. So we talked about instituting a 2-second penalty for things like, the
Coaches holding.
coaches on the grid, the cleanliness at the start line, things like that. So that's where that like 2-second penalty is kind of like our 10-yard penalty. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Yeah, y'all hear that in the chat? Y'all clean up the start line. Wait,
I know.
junk like it's your house. So I want to talk
Sarcasm
about
everywhere.
the league and how it disseminates info. Obviously you want to put things out as timely as possible. And I think a lot of this might come down to resources, but talk about like how things are disseminated to everyone in the league as far as like time constraints, because I know there's a lot of things that need to be put out. But how come it takes so long for certain things to go out?
Yeah, I mean, generally it's a staffing issue for the most part, but there is like one key thing that delays things so much, and that's double checking. So many things have to be double checked and by multiple people. And we literally have on our like growth trajectory a full-time double checker because nobody likes double checking. Not many of us are good at it. In fact, we might not any of us be good at it. And because of that, I take a lot more time than I would like double checking things. And there are certain things I have to double check. And therefore, I have to move other things out of the way to double check. And then I have to have somebody. So that's just one of examples of many things that, we deal with that people don't really get visuals to. But, ultimately, we have a tiny group of people doing something that, a lot of people rely a lot of different dimensions on. And one of the big things that nobody really thinks about is sponsorship. Sponsorship is a whole business by itself. And, the communication, the fulfillment, the strategy, the meetings that are involved with sponsorship is a whole business in itself. And so that all has to be done while operating these events. So we are very understaffed for the amount of output that we have. And the result of that is like any given day. And I think this is true for all of us, is like, we have a list that there's only a hope that we'll get maybe 10 or 20% of the things that we really need to get done in that day done. And so we're like, what can I get away with not doing today so that I can do the things that have to be done today, or it brings the whole ship down? Like, that's literally how every day is. And especially when you're leading up to, a championship event where, you really got to be on point. There's going to be important people there and things like that. Every single day is that thought process among the entire team and the entire team of 4 of saying like, all right, what can I get away with not doing today so that I can make sure I can do the things that if they don't get done are going to make the biggest damage. That's how we think about it.
It's almost like emergency room, like triage. Like you want to help everybody at the same time. You just can't. You just don't have the resources. So you've got to prioritize who's dying first so that you can make everyone live. But
yeah, and that it's so true, because that's why I brought up the double checking thing. Is it takes a way bigger percentage of time than I feel like is reasonable based on the priorities of the business, which is, paying our bills, putting on amazing events, making sure everybody's taken care of. But if we don't do it, a lot of people get upset. So it's one of the things where we got to find a balance of like, what is reasonable amount of time for our staff to do that kind of thing. But these are kind of the things that we balance.
What about standards and having less ambiguity, easier, maybe enforceable standards? There's a lot of questions in regards to how do we get the standards to be, because I don't think there's discrepancy on what the standards are. I just think they want them to be very specific, clear, less ambiguous, and very enforceable.
Yeah, I would like that too. That sounds amazing. No, I think, in a lot of cases, we all want the same thing. But, our number one priority for standards is the spectator experience. And our number one priority for designing races is the spectator experience. And our number one priority for the flow of a match and how we present in the live is the spectator experience. So that's always what we think about. All right, how can we maximize for the spectator experience first and then build in everything afterwards to make it as easy and simple as possible? So that's, in CrossFit, and I also talked about this in the last video I did, the goal of standards is to create a consistent stimulus from person to person to accurately test fitness. That's not our situation whatsoever. We are trying to create as simple a standard as possible to have the most impressive and entertaining movement as possible.
Makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't, as much as maybe there's people out there that like burpees, like it's not a very sexy move. Like,
hey, I'll tell you this.
YouTube disagrees.
YouTube, Instagram, TikTok.
Yeah. No, I'm saying the way that we present it in Grid is a very fascinating way.
Yeah.
But like, if you were just to put somebody out there doing burpees, it's not very, very sexy or very, in my opinion, I could care less. But you have to flirt the line of what is going to draw people in, but also having movements that you can really judge. Because I'm sure there are things that you would love to put in there, but it's just so hard to create standards around those movements. So
we've removed movements because they're too hard to judge, and ones that I really liked.
What's an example?
The double kettlebell front squat.
Yeah, because you had to put your elbows together.
Yeah, and it was such a game changer for teams because there could be one team destroying another team, and the team that just happened to be good at kettlebell front squats, and a lot of times it's the people you would never expect, would then end up blowing past them. And I love those types of movements. Yeah. And it's anytime you can have a movement that changes the dimension of a race by itself, that's a powerful movement. And especially if it's an unassuming one where you're like, oh, kettlebell front squats, that's not that big a deal. But that crushed people. But we just could not get on the same page. Like no matter what we did, no matter how many videos and preps and things we did with the referees, we just could not get a consistent outcome. So we took it out.
And there's a lot of people, like, just so you can say, like, no, there's a lot of people, or not a lot of people, there's people out there in the world that say that Grid prioritizes speed over movement standards. Go ahead.
Fuck yeah, we do. No, look, movement standards is an ambiguous term. Quality movement is what I think people are usually referring.
Yes.
Also very ambiguous movement. What is quality movement? What are you trying to achieve with the movement? Are you trying to achieve safety? Are you trying to achieve a level of fitness? Are you entertaining? Are you creating a dimension of the race? Answer the question of what quality movement is first, and then determine whether or not we're meeting that. And by CrossFit standards, quality movement is very different than Grid League standards. And I don't know if you're talking about players within the league or outside the league or whatever, but like I said, the best example of this is handstand push-ups. And there was this clip of Kale, who became famous for a lot of other reasons, doing handstand push-ups, and even people within the league were like, oh, that's not right. Our standard is arms locked out and butt off the wall. Simple as possible. Now, some people have a really bendy spine and they can eliminate the majority of the weight of their lower body. And I say good for them. If they can meet the standard and they are well equipped to perform the movement, that's all that matters in grid. We're not trying to replicate a stimulus of fitness of a handstand push-up across a whole bunch of different players. We're trying to create something that must be performed, that we can perceive, that the audience can perceive, that's done. And if it benefits somebody with a particular body type, that much the better. That's grid league. You want to try and find somebody that has the body type that's going to help them be really good at handstand push-ups when you have handstand push-ups in the race in front of you. Like, that's grid league. So, we look at these movements very differently than any other sport. And it's normal for people from other sports to be like, that looks crazy, because it does in perspective of their sport. It's like when CrossFit started doing snatches for reps, people are like, this is terrible. This is not what a snatch is for. Snatch is for, is for strength only. It's for max lift only. Like, you're not wrong if you're a weightlifter, but if you're a CrossFitter, it doesn't freaking matter. You're moving a barbell in terms of fitness. So it's all about how you perceive the movement, what you're looking at the movement from. And I understand why people get bent out of shape about movements they're used to seeing for other sports applied differently in ours, but it doesn't make it wrong.
Right.
Totally.
What about the timeline for the season? So, like, having a full season laid out well in advance so players can plan and prepare for the season as a whole, as opposed to maybe getting it piecemealed or in segments.
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about, I'm sure there's difficulties in finding venues and like having, because there's a lot of moving pieces of having, like, going to Dallas and having whoever hosts that event being like, yes, we want you, and having to configure to their timelines. But the players are wanting to know, like, is there any way to make the timeline available earlier in its entirety?
Yeah, I mean, that's a goal of ours always, every year. The sooner we can make those decisions, the sooner it benefits everybody in the league, including us. Our jobs become so much harder the later we know when the matches are. And when we can look at a schedule and call up a venue and be like, is your venue open on this date? Yes. Great. We'll reserve it. That's when we'll know when the schedule is from the year ahead of time. Right now, that's not a feasible opportunity. We are dependent on other people, as you said. And the perfect example is we had our schedule set in January last year. And then our host of 2 events that we were going to decided not to do those 2 events. And we had to reconfigure the entire season again because of it. And so, this kind of does, because, I see there's a comment about double headers. It kind of goes back to, like, renting venues becomes more feasible when we have double headers, because we can get more bang for our buck. There's less staffing required, blah, blah, blah. So there's an argument for them there, is to be able to plan ahead time further. But I think, like, this is another thing where we are very on much the same page with players and teams in this regard. We would love to have it done sooner. There are just a lot of variables that are completely out of our control at this stage of the game to be able to do that a lot of the time.
So that, the next the next point is uniforms. They want to know, basically, why do we have standardized uniform bottoms? Can they look into different sponsors or having different kits? And I don't know what goes into the uniform and what the rules are, but I'm sure it's dependent upon if you have a sponsor for uniforms.
Yeah, I mean, think about if a football team had different bottoms. Like, one guy had, baggy shorts and one guy had stripes and, things like that. It would look a lot more disoriented and chaotic and blah, blah, blah. the more consistent a uniform is, the more professional the presentation. That's a belief that I have that I think has been, and Ruby has, and that has been confirmed by a lot of, our advisors or people that are experienced in TV and media, saying consistency in uniform is one of the core components, because if you can't achieve that, you look amateur, and so we already have like a built-in variability of our uniform because we have two different style tops, which is worth the investment because we have a very unique scenario that presents. But when people are wearing different bottoms, and our ultimate goal with the bottoms is that we have different styles of bottoms that people can wear that are all branded the same way and have the same visual presence. We don't care exactly what style they are. We want people to be comfortable as much as possible. We just want the sport to present professionally and look like something that should be on national TV coverage. Because the more it looks like that, the more people will be interested in doing that, and the more people will interact with it like it is that. And that starts with being consistent and presenting a professional product.
Valerie, she just says, make the bottoms black. Be done with it.
Let's talk about the black.
Simple, right?
Yes, do it.
Yeah. So I know we get a lot of pushback about the black. The black is the absolute worst color for media, especially for us. And here's the reason. When you're creating impactful media, you want the image and the video to be three-dimensional and like more powerful and present more reality. And black absorbs all light, so it presents flat. So it takes a lot of the form and impact out of players. Combine that with the fact that a lot of our backdrops are black, and people start to like lose sections of themselves in the backdrop because the black blends with the black. So black is, people love black because it covers everything and hides everything and it matches everything or whatever. And I don't care, but like the black is only an issue in media because it literally takes the impact out. Like people look worse in black. Not worse is not the right word.
It is the right word. I'm sitting there watching them on a screen for hours, and it does like totally blend in to the ground, and like looks bad for the background, and you don't get to see like maybe like the full depth of whatever people are doing. Like for example, squats. Like okay, where does the floor start and like the shorts, end kind of thing. So it also makes it harder in that aspect to watch online.
Yeah, and when you have a black backdrop behind teams and the team colors and whatnot, and you have people that blend into the backdrop versus you have people that have different colors, they pop off the back. You see them more impactfully, and it just the media presentation is so much better. So ultimately, and there's a chance we'll be able to do this next year. We have a long off season, which is helpful for this kind of thing. But ideally, we have custom printed bottoms that do everything that people want them to do to cover up the blemishes and whatnot, which is why people like black, but also don't stop you from being, dulled or less impactful in the media, because this is a media-driven sport business. Like the virality is an important component of our sport. From the get-go, this was Tony's vision. And it's the only reason that we've been able to grow from where we've been. And so you have to intensely focus on every dimension of when we create media around the sport, how can we maximize the impact it's going to have both on short form social media and on the live stream. And both of them are dramatically impacted the more black is in the uniform. And that goes even for the tops. Like teams love to have black tops. And
Chris
I always try and negotiate away from it because of that.
Chris Shafi asks, well, what about matching the bottoms with the uniform top?
It's possible. Again, I know I'm probably too influenced by football. But like the NFL has done so many things really, really well. And when you're building a brand new sport, there is no playbook. So you have to look at something and say, why do they do what they do that's doing it really well? And the NFL has done it really well. So we shortcut a lot of our rules and things by looking at the NFL and seeing what they've done. The NFL generally has a, two-color uniform. And so we do gather a lot of inspiration from that. I'm not necessarily fully against it personally. I think it's kind of a thing where, we kind of look at what the options are, both from a fulfillment perspective and design opportunity perspective, and make a decision. Like there has to be, ideally, there's some sort of connection. Like I don't like the gray bottoms and the color tops either. It's just a matter of what options we have at a given time,
There was a comment. I'll bring it up. Josh said he paid $600 instead of $400 to have 6 matches, 3 double headers instead of 4 matches. If it's more opportunity to display sponsorships, it kind of goes into the light that we were talking about with double headers. There's some people in the chat, Dakota being one of them, that would prefer double headers. Is it possible, or is it ever a thought to raise the player fees in order to offset some of these costs that it takes to have double headers and then just have more matches that way? Or is it simply you want to have the right venue, and so getting the venue really dictates how many matches you can actually have?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is a tremendous outcome of this event here today, is that we're getting feedback around double headers that I frankly did not expect. And I think it's a great thing that there are, prominent people in the league that have a vision for the sport that are pushing for double headers. Like that's powerful, and we're listening. And I think Ruby would be very excited, and Lindsay would be very excited about double headers, because it does consolidate a lot of resources. The main issue that I see is that we don't have the size of referee crew or equipment crew, and equipment crew is a lot easier to get. Like if you have dollars, you can get equipment crew. Dollars don't necessarily equate referee squad, and we do pay our referee squad. And CrossFit doesn't do that. High Rocks doesn't do that. Whatappalooza doesn't do that. We do pay our referee squad because we ask so much more of them than anything I just mentioned. And it's still nowhere near enough. And that's the big risk, I think, is how do we get a referee squad that can either endure 2 days matches? Because I can guarantee you, if teams end up in the last 2 matches on day 2 and have a botched match because the referees can't see straight, they're going to be pretty disappointed that we had double headers. So we're going to have to either think about how can we beef up the referee squad or reduce the length of the matches.
Right. So let's talk about scoring, the actual match, itself, determining winner and loser. Is there any thoughts to changing the scoring system? Maybe talking about different points. I'm going to say it, Cassie. You know where I'm going with this, with the match format, and changing the order of the races or changing the races altogether, with partner forward not being the lead off of a grid match.
Okay, so I have an answer for this, but what is the proposed alternative to partner forward?
So here's what I was thinking. So in case you didn't know, I did a podcast with Alex Smith and Danny B a few weeks ago on the Gridlocked Pod. Shout out Gridlocked Pod. But so they were like, oh, and there's like a few things that like we would like to see changed about the league and stuff like that. So me wondering what they're thinking, being new to like what Grid League is now, I'm like, okay, so what would you like to see changed? And Alec was like, well, partner forward shouldn't be the first race. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's the way that we do things. That's the way we've always done things. That's crazy. And he said it has the most rules that are hardest to follow, and that it wasn't the most fun to watch. which fair. It's an interesting perspective because I've been around it long enough to be like, oh wow, like I never even thought of that. It is the most like CrossFit-y, more traditional fitness sport kind of race that we have. So in my brain, I'm thinking, okay, for it not to affect the roster rules too much that we have, or like the sub rules or anything like that, I would think to switch it with mirror and just make partner forward just not the first one and make mirror the first one.
Okay. All right. So I have thoughts. First of all, I love Alec and Danny, and they're amazing. And I appreciate the fact that they are thinking like this. Like, how can we improve the sport? And Alec has made suggestions that we have already taken steps to implement this year. But I disagree about this. I think partner forward is the absolute best possible race you could ever ask for a match. And this is one where Tony's vision, and he explained his vision to me, and I've even laid other reasons that I think partner forward is the best race to start on top of his reasons. And the other one is sprint relay. Sprint relay is the absolute perfect finish to a match. Everything else in between, I care a lot less about personally, except for the ringer points. The ringer points are clearly ones that universally people love.
Yeah.
Here's why I love partner forward first, and it speaks to the core component of what Grid League is. What differentiates Grid League from CrossFit? Like, what would you guys say? Like, if you could say one word, what would be differentiating from CrossFit?
One word.
One word.
Exciting.
Okay. I like that. Dan? Yep.
So the question that you're asking is, what makes Grid League different than CrossFit from
so much
from an
There's
athlete
a lot,
standpoint?
but if you're gonna sum it up by one word, and it's not deep, like just that comes to the top of your head.
I mean, I would say, just in my opinion, it's I can't do it in one word, but like the team aspect. Like it is there's a clear team win and a clear team lose. Like it's not like
teamwork.
in CrossFit, it's on you. Like go do work and whatever you get, you get. But I know that's not what you're looking for, but that's what I love about Grid.
Because it doesn't matter what you said, it's encapsulated in partner forward. Right. That's my main point. Is like and I disagree with the statement you just said, it's our CrossFit-y type race. I think the triad is the most CrossFit-y type race. Like that's just like chaos, people doing essentially a workout together to try and get to the end. Partner forward is a dance. It is a choreographed movement between two teammates that must be perfectly executed to be given the best chance to win. And you don't perform that race without practicing with the person you're in. And that's not necessarily, like the mirror is also one that you must practice a lot. But partner forward, anybody who's good at partner forward is doing it multiple times with their partner leading up to the race. And there is so much fine-tuned movement, precision, and timing in that race to be done perfectly. And when it is done perfectly, it's like fucking music. Like it is beautiful to watch. And there are certain players in this league that can perform that race like everybody will in the future. And it's incredible because not only are they accentuating every movement perfectly at the top and the bottom, they're moving faster than humanly possible. And they're going exactly where they need to go as soon as they're done. And their partner is getting exactly in position at the exact point they need to be when their partner gets in position. Like it is a choreographed dance of beautiful execution when it's done well. That's number one. That's number one. That is the first reason partner forward.
That's right.
Fast action is Grid League. Fast action is Grid League. Fast action is Grid League. When races go fast, people get hype. When they do studies, when do people engage with sports? When there's fast action happening. We have got to lean in to what makes our sport, and that is when people move fucking fast. They move fast. Partner forward, you have to move incredibly fast, and you have to do it in sync with your partner. Another reason, in the middle of partner forward, players have to run out in full speed and run back in at full speed. That is a reset moment. Like, there's a whole new set of players coming into that race that can absolutely completely change the outcome of that race by themselves. And that action of sprinting out together and running in together is a clear indication of where teams are within the race. So it resets their positioning. It's also like visually impactful when you see two people running up at full speed and they're the bigger players getting in position in the third and fourth quadrant. Like, that's powerful. Seeing them run full speed. And I'll give you, this actually, Joshua made a comment about the weight of our dumbbells in the third and fourth quadrant in partner forward. And this is a perfect opportunity to talk about it, because there's a moment in the partner forward that I think is a very important one in the history of our sport. And it's when Amanda Fisher and Griffin Raleigh ran in the championship match of the Sharks and the Wild race. And they were way behind in that race. And there was just like this moment where they came running in. And like, if you're the Sharks, you have to be scared when they come, because like those two players are by far the best two players in the third and fourth quadrant together. And they will change the impact of the race by themselves. And the fact that they did, and they just barely caught it just at the very end to overtake that race and then never looked back in the match. Like, if they didn't win that race, it's a whole different match. And I think that really speaks to, like, there are a lot more lead changes in partner forward than any other race. And that, like, I think the fact that race played out the way it did is one of the big reasons that match did so well on social media. It's that it's got a 450,000 views on it, because when people land on that match and then watch that first race, they're like, oh shit, this is crazy, because that team was so far behind and then they caught up. So getting back to Josh's point, we want close outcomes. We don't want teams to be able to get so far ahead of another team that they can't catch up. And until Griffin and Amanda, can't run in a match and the team on the other side of the grid be scared, we don't need to raise the weights, because they are the peak of what the third and fourth quadrant should be. And until teams can be far enough ahead that it doesn't matter that they don't have a lead, then we don't need to raise the weights. And that kind of scenario played out with the Breakers and the Palms and the Bandits and the Brigade, where there was one team ahead and the other team caught up in the third and fourth quadrant, because that's a reset moment in that race. So there's so many opportunities for dramatic moments in partner forward. Here's another reason. You get a big variability in body type from start to finish. And it exemplifies a characteristic of Grid League, which is a range of body types. You get your smaller, faster players. You get your bigger, powerful players. Here's another reason. You can have a wide range of movements included in the partner forward. And you can select some of the ones that tend to get better traction in social media, and therefore will translate to a more engaging experience initially for a first-time viewer. And for example, the mirror, you're very limited. Like, it's barbell movements right now. And I love the mirror, but it's also all strength athletes too. And it's also like kind of hard to tell what's going on because there's a lot of people going at once. So I think, part of the cost of grid and the fact that it is a team sport is the power of it. Meaning, it's hard. Like you have to have rules that accommodate a lot of people because it's a team sport. You have to have a lot of people involved because it's a team sport. That also means it's harder to pick up what's going on. It feels a little more chaotic no matter what race it is. But when you get over those facts and you have something simple enough to engage with, to get across the finish line with, then it hooks you in enough to hopefully learn more about what you need to fall in love with the races.
Would there ever be any time where you change or add or take away a race and replace it with something else? Or is it strictly the races that are there are great and you toy with the elements that just go into those races? That's where the creativity lies. Or do you really think, like, after the season, is there a creative way where I could change a race or add a race or take one away and replace it with something different?
Yeah, I don't think anything's set in stone. I don't think any of us come at this like we have the perfect product. That's not the case at all. And in fact, not too long ago, we made some significant changes to the races. We just added the ringer point in 2020, I think it was 2020. We converted the Echo from male and female exclusive to combined in 2019. Those were two major changes to the races that I think yielded big benefits. Here's where my head's at with now, and I think Ruby and Brandon agree with this, I think, is that the race configuration, when you look at the data in people viewing the live stream, and I'll give you an example. When you used to see a live, like we didn't have a live stream when we made this change, but we would post races online or post matches online. And when you got to the Echo, it was like a downward slope in the Echo because it was 4 of the same race repeated and it got boring. And then like with when we removed those, when we added the ringer points, like you would see people like watching the ringer points multiple times. So we know like there's engagement there. We have good retention, especially with people that watch our matches regularly throughout the entire match. I think if we're going to put focus into improving the sport overall and growing the sport, because that's what I view my personal job to be, is to grow this sport. We're better served putting focus and effort into some of the methods of telling the story of the sport. Who's playing the sport? How can we enhance the viewer experience of the races and matches that are there? And that will yield ultimately better and faster growth for where we are right now than reconfiguring the races. But just like football, we'll always have the idea of like, all right, is there an opportunity to improve things? And if the team owners were all like, Mather, you're an idiot, partner forward should be after mirror, I'm here for it. Like, I am not the end all be all. And in fact, all those types of decisions filter through the team owners. But yeah, I don't think it's perfect. I know we have opportunity to improve, but I think the biggest opportunity to make the biggest impact right now is around how we present what's existing. And as we grow and see opportunities, potentially we'll make other changes. But right now, how do we dress up the live stream? How do we tell the story better? How do we, and how do we tell the story of what it is to be on a team? And I know there are people in the chat right now that are on a team that are like, if we had a camera in our team house at this time, we'd all be like major stars in this world. Like everybody that's been on a team can think of those moments. And that's really the inspiration behind, like, when I came home one day from a Surge event and said to Ruby, I'm all in. Like, this is it over, because I was in the team house. I saw what happened in that fucking team house amongst the players. And I was like, if there was a camera right now, this would be the #1 reality sports show in the world. Quickly, very quickly, because of all the just natural human interaction that was happening within that house. And I think that is a huge part. Like, we are just at the beginning of telling the story of what Grid League is. Like, we have barely scratched the surface of telling the story of what Grid League truly is. And that's where we need to put as much focus and effort, because that's what's lagging right now. I don't think the configuration of the races is the lagging indicator. I think it's telling our story.
I didn't expect you to cook me so hard, Mather. But you gave me goosebumps. It made me reconsider. It was more of like a partner forward gets lost, because we've spoken a lot about trying to get people hooked into those first few minutes of a race. And I was thinking maybe it might just be like the setup and maybe finding better ways to do partner forward better justice for
Yeah,
the
and
live.
I also want to say, like, I get the concern with like the chaotic nature of it, especially when a team isn't performing it well. It does look chaotic, and
Yeah.
it's easy not to perform it well, and that's what makes it such an amazing race to perform well. But that's true of any sport, like anything. And think about this, like think about when every team has an Amanda and Griffin in the third and fourth quadrant of the partner forward. Think about when every team has a Paula and Eric as their two primary bodyweight specialists, as just an example of a pair that is like widely considered to be the best in the league. These races are going to come down to the minuscule little elements of ability, planning, and execution that we can't even comprehend right now. Like, just think about that. So as we get over the hump, this sport will get better and better and better and better and better every single year, every single match, because the players will get better. It will get more coordinated. And like when we first put pistol thrusters in, people were all over the grid, and it, looked kind of chaotic or whatever. But now they're getting a lot cleaner. And so I think partner forward will get cleaner and cleaner in its presentation and how it looks. But I get the concern with it being chaotic. I just think that if you want fast action, the cost of that, or the side effect of that, is the potential for chaotic presentation. But I do believe that fast action far supersedes anything else as far as what the priority should be to engage people quickly, because there's something primal about when you see people going head to head and putting 100% effort into something that draws you in. And it's the same type of idea behind the UFC, where, Dana was like, if you see a fight on the corner, it's impossible not to watch it. If you see two people lined up at a start line about to put everything on the line to go at it in a race, you can't help but watch it. And this is why people love us coming to expos. Because when somebody comes to an expo, they walk by a grid league match, they're going to have a better time at that expo because they're about to stop and watch a race. You know what I mean? And I think partner forward is just like the perfect demonstration of a sequential race. Like, there's no segment is too long. Like, there's always fast action. There's always something happening. And so it might turn some people off from a chaos perspective, but at least the numbers say on YouTube that people retain well through partner forward. It's at the end of partner forward that we have to worry about, when the first race is over and they don't have the next expectation to look forward to. So again, this is the wrapper we put around our sport, not the sport itself. But I think is the issue is like, how do we retain people at the end of partner forward? Because, I think I've said
the chat has been blowing up on reruns. So
Okay.
I want to go back and hit on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Artur, I appreciate you, because not only do you present a problem, you also present a solution. So I'll show you a couple of these comments, and then you can respond accordingly.
Yep.
Artur says, the fact that reruns, we do the back half of the race, and that benefits the team who is better at those elements, no matter how far in front the other team was in their original race.
Mm-hmm.
So he provides a solution.
Mm-hmm.
The solution is rerun with half the reps of the entire race in all elements, not the back half, so that the team is good at the front or back half of the race. It's a level playing field. And then you have other people. You have Dalton Herrero. He gives an example of Jack and Jill rerun the Brigade versus the Palms. They took away the highest skilled movement in the beginning of the race, makes it a completely different race. Chris Choppy got his teammates back. He agreed something needs to change with reruns. And then Artur adds sprint relay, Palms and Lions, Brigades versus Sharks. Whoever was best on the back half would always win.
Mhm.
So when you look at those comments, obviously, reruns, it's a point of contention. What's your thoughts on how to make that better?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair point. I think it's understandable because it's true. Like when there is a rerun, it favors the team that happens to be better at those last portions of the of the race. We have thought about half of the reps before, and it also alters the race significantly. And so, does it alter it less? Maybe. But the way we have traditionally thought about it is that we're prioritizing the viewer experience. And what would be better from a viewer experience is to see a shorter, more dramatic version of the race. And I know like that might be hard for a player to wrap their heads or arms around. But I think, if there was a clear benefit to doing half the reps of all the movements, which is a reasonable solution, it might hold some weight. And of course, like I'm always willing to have the conversation with the team owners if they felt like it was the case. But if I was coming at it from like, how do I architect my team, my grid league team? There's a couple of characteristics of this sport that I would have in mind. And one of them is the second half of the race is more important because of that, and these are some things that you have a lot less opportunity to have real influence on at this stage of the game because we don't have a draft and things like that. So I recognize that. But again, we're thinking about what product do we want to have in the future? Like what sport do we want to have in the future to create those raving fans that, talk shit in the text about their, opponent and whatnot. And that shorter version, a dramatic version of that race rerun is like where we concluded would be a more entertaining experience overall.
What about subs not being allowed on a rerun?
In some races, that would make sense. It could work for any of them, honestly. Like, the gridlock right now does not have subs, and that's like the only time that we really do that. That is a potential way of potentially, reducing. Yeah, depending on the race, like in certain races it won't matter. In the triad, it certainly will. Yeah, I mean, reruns is not the perfect solution. It's the most dramatic solution. And, we are building this sport for the future and for what we think it can be. And, here's another characteristic of our sport that you have to build into when you're orchestrating a team. And that's the fact that the sprint relay is worth more points than every other race. And that's like a small nuance that you have to consider when you're putting a team together and strategizing a team that, and if we can get to a point where we feel like we have the best product from a spectator perspective, and I feel like the team owners all believe that that is important enough to be on board with that, then it becomes, and we need to have a compelling argument for all these different things. And some of them we've talked about in the past, but we haven't in a long time, and maybe we should again, and all of those kinds of things. But then we accept them as that is our sport, and how do we architect our team to give our best chance to win, given that being our sport? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we think about it. Nothing's off the table. I'm sure we'll talk about it in the off season, but I appreciate the ideas and I appreciate the thought people are putting into architecting.
Definitely. As we get ready to wind down a little bit, big picture, what is the end goal? Like, what is your vision? What is the end goal for the growth of the league, and how far away from that are we?
Here's how I picture it. And Ruby and I talk about this all the time. And anybody that'll listen, there is a lot of dimensions of our sport that make it really difficult to start a sport. And perfect proof of this. When was the last new team sport that got big? Can you think of one?
Banana ball.
Banana ball is a variation of baseball. It's not a new sport.
Pickleball.
And that's what I mean. Like,
it's a variation of similar sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think pickleball is the best example, but it's never going to be a spectator sport. It's never going to be like something that maybe it will. I mean, you wouldn't think of golf as a spectator sport, but it kind of is. But anyway, like the main point is, and also pickleball is a small team. It's 4 people. I'm talking about like 8, 10 plus team. It's really freaking difficult. And we knew how hard it was. Of course, you hear this all the time. We knew how hard it was to start a new team sport, but we might have approached things differently. But there's so many variables around having a team sport, especially one that uses as much equipment as we do, that really puts dampers on your ability to grow it and for people to participate and experience it and then be more aware of it. There are like these stages to growth that I think we have to hit as a sport. And where we are now is millions of people know what Grid League is. And that fact alone is really cool. Think about that. Like millions and millions of people have watched clips of Grid League, hundreds of millions, which is super cool. And like we're seeing people that don't even CrossFit know what Grid League is now, which is, again, really cool. Some players get recognized in like the grocery store and stuff like that. Super cool. However, I think what we need to do now is tell the story of our sport better. Like I said, get people to understand who the players are better. And when we're able to do that, when we're able for people outside to truly engage with some of these characteristics that I've talked about the sport, and I haven't really gotten into them actually too much. But I think it'll happen like wildfire. Like I think, and I just don't know when that point is. And I think there's a couple of key things that could happen at any point that would lead to that. But look, UFC started in 1994. It struggled for 12 years. And the Fertitta brothers almost gave up. And then they started the reality show that blew it up. That's like the UFC is like the closest emulation to what we think of ourselves as, but it's a much easier sport to start because it's only one person fighting one person. The fact that it's a team sport with all this equipment makes it so much harder. So I think we're on a similar path to UFC. I think the potential is even higher than UFC. Of course, that's a bold statement, but if you made it this far, into what we're in, then hopefully you kind of can see the potential. Yes, Joshua is absolutely correct. Exactly. I mean, like everybody who's been in one of those team houses knew exactly what I was talking about. Exactly what I was talking about. And some a lot more than others, but even the ones that aren't near as much as some are still really good TV shows. You know what I mean? And, you look at like 30 for 30 and, NFL films and stuff like that. Some of the more popular things in the world. But then, more importantly, you look at Love Island. Because I think, honestly,
don't start. Cassie will be on a 2-hour-long diatribe about Love Island.
I think from a reality show perspective, we're closer to Love Island than we are to 30 for 30. We're somewhere in the middle, but we're closer to Love Island.
I always said, like, I think I had Amber Boast on, and she's a big Survivor fan, as of I. I told her, I was like, it would be must see TV to put 20 different Grid League players and play a game of Survivor with them, with challenges, and like, I think just that alone would just be
How about
amazing.
this? How about practicing for a grid match and then going out and like going out on the town and then getting ready to go compete and being together in a house together for, weeks at a time, practicing every day, getting to know each other, learning each other's characters, getting in fights, like falling in love, and then going out and competing and going out and trying to win. And then somebody fucks up and somebody gets mad at somebody else and they get outcast and then they get back. Like, we've all seen this. Like, it is the perfect drama story. This is why football is as big as it is, because it's these huge teams of men in all variety of personalities and body types and skill sets coming together to battle it out. And wide receivers act a hell of a lot different than linemen. Just like your female body weight specialist acts a hell of a lot different than your male strongman that's on the team. But the way that they interact with each other and overcome those differences is the magic of Grid League, on top of everything else that happens from a relationship perspective, because every type of relationship exists on a Grid League team, every single type. And it's new. Like, teammates don't date. Women don't coach men. Like, all of these things are unique and to us. And this is the power of the sport that few people recognize right now, that we have not told one little bit. And trust me, I want to. Like, obviously, you see how passionate about it. This is the whole reason we're doing this stuff. And it all comes down.
Fico's like, great. Coaches are going to have a blast with this.
But yeah, it's going to be crazy. But just think about it. Like, I just think, kind of like UFC, we have the right style of show or way of presenting certain aspects of our sport. It will catch on like wildfire. But it also depends on who's involved too. Like, who is playing on these teams and what's their interaction like, both from a personality perspective, but what they've done in other sports, how much recognition they have, things like that, all contribute to the attention and the drama of what is actually happening on the team. So, to get back to your answer, I have no friggin' idea, but the potential is huge. And I think it could happen pretty much anytime. And Ruby and I have talked a lot about how, like, there are certain components of things that, if they happen in the right order, could, really blow this thing up quick.
Definitely. Well, before Mather, I give you a chance to kind of close us out with anything that you feel pressing that you want to convey. Cassie, what did I miss? What did we miss? What's left?
I don't know. My head is just going in circles. I think it was really useful to come on here for all three of us, just because, I mean, I've been a part of the sport for a little longer than you have, Daniel, and then Mather, obviously, for much longer than I have. You're the whole entire brain, you and Ruby. But it's important to understand, like, the different perspectives. Even I worry a lot about the spectators, but I don't think too much about, like, the team's perspective of how everything else is going. So when we say, like, crush the commissioner, like how I said earlier, I'm like, I'm always looking forward to talking to Mather, because he's always gonna, like, steer me in a different direction and make me think about things that I didn't think about before. I'm like, oh man, I didn't even get to crush him at all. But but there's so much fun stuff that is, like, still to come for the sport. So I can't even think about, like, what I missed or what's to come. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we are just getting started. I feel very
it's exciting to think about and excited. Yeah. Well, Mather, before we end this thing and give you a chance to have the floor, I want to appreciate, what you've done. You've gracious with your time. You've hit the ground running. You hit all the questions head on. But obviously, being the commissioner of the league, you want to convey messages and you want to make sure people hear what, the message clearly. So from you and your standpoint, having this, what is the last parting words that you want everybody to know?
Yeah, I think if you showed up to this, man, I don't care if you trashed me. I don't care if I'm grateful for you. There's something that we have in common, and that's an appreciation for this sport. And I know not everybody's going to be on board with, how Ruby and I see things, or Brennan or Lindsay or Stephanie or you guys. But, there are, if we all have the same goal, which is to see this sport get bigger, then I think we can overcome our differences in perspective, because we all benefit when the sport gets bigger. And I see this as my job. And, you naturally can't have a singular goal without some friction, So when you make decisions as the singular goal is to grow the sport, it's going to cause frictions other places. And especially when you have such a limited team and resources like we do. So I understand and respect why people feel that friction sometimes. And I need to do a better job of doing things like this, and portraying how we think about the sport and why we make the decisions that we do, so that it becomes more apparent and hopefully lessens some of that friction, and hopefully even helps us all get rowing in the same direction. Because I'm pretty sure if you're here, you want to see the sport get bigger. You want to see it grow. So, hopefully I've made people feel like we have the thought processes and experiences and passion to, help steer things in that direction. And that means that when we have to make decisions that aren't the most popular, that there'll be more understanding around it. But, we always say, like, when people have care and passion for how things are done, that means they are an important part of it. And I truly believe that. And I truly see myself as a teammate of everybody that's on this call, and that everybody that's been a part of this league. We're on the same team. We might not always understand each other all the time, but we all want the same thing. And we want clean grid matches. We want, a great presentation for spectators, and we want to see the sport grow. And we want players to have a great time. And the bigger the sport is, the better time they'll have in a lot of ways. So
Absolutely.
thank you all for being here, and thank you guys for doing this, and thank you for being a big part of the sport. So grateful for everybody.
Very grateful to have the sport. Very grateful to have met all the people that I've met along this journey, especially you, Cassie, you, Mather. It's something special. You hit the nail on the head, Mather. Everybody wants the same goal. Yeah, you don't have to agree on how we get there, but as long as we get there, that's the thing. And I think everybody wants that, and I think it's right there for the taking. And I'm excited to be a small part of it. So, I appreciate the time tonight. I know everybody in the chats. I appreciate y'all for interacting, putting your questions out there, comments out there, even if it was silly as shampoo and banana ball. I appreciate it all. Cassie, appreciate you hopping on here, spending some time with me. It was a lot of fun. Got to do it again sometime.
Heck
Yeah, and I do also want to mention, obviously, like, you can see how passionate I get about this sport, and put a lot of thought into it. So I hope I didn't come across like poo-pooing anybody's idea or anything. That's not what it's about. I really was about showing how much care and passion has been put into the articulation of the sport in every dimension, and because that's important for people to know, and it doesn't mean that we're right. It doesn't mean that we aren't willing to listen and change. We absolutely are. We always are. That's how you get to the best product. But no decision is made on a whim without a lot of thought. And we're freaking 10 years into this sport. Like, we've put a lot into this for sure.
One of the things that you've said a lot to me is, like, anytime that I've had an idea that I've come to you, like, why didn't you think of this? Like, how I used to talk to you because I was not knowing, like, how your thought process was or anything like that. And you would be like, there's nothing that like, not that there's nothing, but there's like very little that you can like bring to the table that I haven't like obsessed over like 50,000 times already. And it really shows in like how you answer everything. And like, I really appreciate you taking the time to explain it too, because it's really important.
Can we end on a quick story about Cassie real quick?
Oh God.
So Cassie came into the league doing equipment first. And those of you that know her now, she was a completely different person back then. Like I thought, like I was a little intimidated by her, and I thought that she was gonna like fight everybody. Like she had the worst RBF I've ever seen on a person. But she just kept like learning more and working her way up, and now she's like the face of the sport. It's just crazy. Like she started on the equipment crew. Paul brought her in, and I was like, "Oh, this girl hates me and everybody here." But now she's like an integral part of all. It's just crazy. It's crazy to see the evolution of Cassie for sure. It's so cool.
I love that. Thanks for saying that. I've trained my RBF face to like not be there. I've definitely had to like train it out. So thank you for saying that and appreciating my effort.
Yeah, and like Lindsay and Brandon and Rubio and Paul will know what I'm talking about, but so few others will. It was hilarious.
That's so funny.
On that note, Cassie, you're smiling, so that's a good way to end. We won't leave you like stonewalling us with your RBF. So we'll get out of here with that. But I appreciate everybody's time. Y'all be on the lookout for power rankings coming out. I know everybody's looking for it, but there's, I'm just trying to build some anticipation for championships coming up August 23rd, Mather. It's not too long away. It's going to be the Western Conference Finals. You got the number 1 seed, the Sharks, taking on the number 2 seed, the Brigade. And then you got the Eastern Conference Finals, the number 1 team, the Lions, taking on the number 2 seed, the Breakers. The winners of those two go on to duel for the 2025 crown, man. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. And I can't wait to see you guys again in Kissimmee. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Always remember, strong body, sharp minds, grit and grind all the time. We're out.